Well, I done messed up. I'm stripping the paint on what the Dell, but stick around to the end of the video to avoid my mistakes. So today we're going to strip down the case, the Dell. And what this is a paint job I think I put down 3 or 4 weeks ago. A nice 2-stage automotive paint. Came out okay. There were some flaws in it, and I'm just not totally sold on trying to work around those to make a case that I really want to come out looking really good. So the easiest thing to do is strip it all down and start over. It doesn't hurt that I have a new style of paint that I want to try. So that's part of something that factored into this. But as far as projects go, sometimes it's better just to start fresh on something, and that way you get what you want in the end. So that's what we're going to do. Now, if you haven't stripped paint off of a case before or used paint strippers, it's relatively simple as long as you don't mind some pretty vicious chemicals. What we're going to be using today on the metal parts is Aircraft Paint Stripper Ultra. The Ultra actually does work better. It's sometimes they're right. Next one will be Extreme. But we're going to be using that, and how you use it is you're supposed to scratch the paint up. I never do. But you slather it on. I cover it in saran wrap to keep it from drying out while it's peeling the paint. The paint will pop up. You scrape it off with a scraper, rinse it off with a hose, and you're pretty much done. Stripping paint off of metal is pretty simple. Now, when this was the original paint that came on the Dell, it was a little bit tougher. Manufacturer paints are pretty durable things, so it takes some effort getting it off. But Aircraft Paint Stripper does work. But this should be pretty simple since it's fresh paint. We'll go on, we'll take it outside, slather it up, saran wrap it, peel the paint off, rinse it, bring it down here, and it's almost ready to go. Again, just some cleanup to get it ready for paint again. Now, the plastic, that's a different story. So I don't know, but I think Aircraft Paint Stripper is supposed to be okay on plastic, or this new Ultra is. But I don't trust that. I know that acetone and thinners will just melt ABS. And I have an old trick that, although it takes a while, will take the paint right off of this ABS without hurting it a bit. And I'll get into that after I get those stripped down. So that was pretty easy. Typically, if you pile that stripper on, the paint will pop off pretty easily. But I only had like a quarter can, so I was using it a little sparsely. So there was some scraping involved. Nothing that hurt the finish or scratched up the metal. There will be some sanding involved to get this prepped for paint anyway, so not too worried about it. But almost everything came off. A few spots of primer and some orange are still left, but nothing I can't deal with sandpaper or a scratch pad, to be honest. So with that done, we're ready for the plastic parts. And I didn't look to see if stripper worked on this as far as like not melting plastic, but I'm not going to take that chance. So let's grab some stuff and we will get this started. And so to pull the paint off of our plastic parts, what we are going to use is brake cleaner. Now this is just some cheap .3. It doesn't really matter. I think .3 or .4 would be the ones you want because .5 is silicone based and .5 something or other, 5.1 I think may be similar, but I know .3 and .4 work. If you've ever changed your brake fluid or added brake fluid or bled your brakes on a motorcycle and accidentally spilled some of this stuff on a painted part, you will know it is great at removing paint. But it doesn't really hurt plastic. So we can douse this in brake fluid. It will slowly eat this paint off. That is the one problem with it, is it takes a minute, but in about a week, we'll have this completely free of paint with no damage to the plastic. I'm not sure about the filler that I have on here. That may come off as well, but you know, if we have to redo our fill spot, that's part of the process. So let's go ahead and open this bad boy. And what I like to do with these is, number one, grab some gloves so I don't get brake fluid all over myself. But I put some towels over it to keep brake fluid on it so it doesn't. Brake fluid will tend to on nice paint bead up and roll off. So you're either checking on it every 30 minutes to make sure it's still on the surface, or well, that glove sucked. Really? You're either checking on it all the time to make sure the fluid's on it, or you can put a towel on it, soak the towel in brake fluid, and it'll keep it on there for you. So, let's go ahead and get a, hopefully, I don't have a brush. Oh well, no brushes. We'll make it work. So we're going to grab a couple of these. I've used microfibers in the past because they do tend to bend around the plastic parts really well, especially motorcycle parts. But I was kind of hoping to maybe use something that I didn't want to use again later. Because pretty much after this, these towels are going to be trash. So there we go. So basically, we're just going to add brake fluid. Now, how I learned about this was the first case mod that I really did was my F3 mod, and I had painted the top and totally messed it up. I'm gonna go ahead and get some on the bottom of this too. This stuff is slick as snot. Totally messed the paint up on that, and it was really expensive paint at the time. Also, you know, didn't want to buy another case to get the plastic top part and retry what I was doing. So searched the internet, and somebody's like, oh yeah, brake fluid does it. So tried it, it worked great. I'm gonna save some of that for maybe next time I need it. But yeah, it takes a while and you'll have to watch it. What it'll do is slowly start peeling it up. So what I normally do is come back, check on it, see if there's any paint that I can get off with a brush or something, so that maybe create a hole and give it another vector for it to kind of eat into the paint. So basically, this is the whole process. We just let this sit for the next week or so, and we should have paint falling off of it. And once that's done, we'll come back and check it out. So it has been about a day and a half since we put our brake fluid on our front panel. Just grab some gloves because this brake fluid is just a mess to work with. Honestly, it's not that bad, but it's slick, nasty. Let's go ahead and see. Oh, this is, I hope the camera's picking this up. It doesn't smell great, but I think this is doing exactly what we want. Look at that. Paint is bubbling right up. That is awesome. It's exactly what we want. We want all this stuff just to give up hope and move on with life. Now we're about 4 or 5 days into soaking this in brake fluid. Let's see what we have. Paper towels are holding up amazingly well. A brush. That stuff's a little sticky, but it's eating up on the sides. I think that's because there's not as much clear on this. That 2-stage is not something that this normally deals with, I think. I think the clear makes it pop off better. I was noticing that with the stripper as well. Look at that. All this is just ready to pop right off. No harm to our plastic at all. Though the filler is not having such a good day. But that's okay, we can go back in and smooth that back out, make it right again. Don't want to, but I can. Alright, so far everything has gone great. The paint on the metal parts of the case is stripped off. They look great. I mean, as good as stripped parts look. The front panel was in the brake fluid. It was cleaning the paint off of it. And I go in and I'm brushing some more paint off to try to loosen some more up. And I squeeze a little bit and it just gives way. So that's a problem, isn't it? Now, I don't know exactly, I don't know what the name of the failure method is. It isn't brittle and it's not melty or anything, but it's a friable, that's a soil term. I don't know. It's a mess. I have totally screwed this thing up. And that brings us to a big thing about modding is there is always a chance that you will screw something up. That's just there. It's part of the deal. If you want to mod something, you might mess it up. Luckily, a lot of times will be you're cutting a piece of acrylic that you're adding in and you mess up the cut. So you just get another piece of acrylic. Another 20 bucks, 30 bucks. Do the part again. Sometimes you can change your design, make it work. Maybe it makes it for the better. Who knows? But sometimes you wind up with a case that part kind of has to go with it. So sometimes with the cases, you can talk to manufacturers, get replacement parts, check eBay, stuff like that, Marketplace. Maybe somebody has a broke case that they're getting, piecing out and trying to get rid of, and the part you need is in perfect shape, so you can pick it up for 10, 15, 20 bucks. Sometimes that's not an option, and sometimes you end up buying another case. I had hoped that I would jump on eBay, find somebody getting rid of a panel because they're parting it out, and I'd pay 20 bucks for it, and boom, we're back in business. The second hope was that I was going to pay another $50 for another case, and I would just have an extra case of spares to get one part. Sucks, a little more expensive, but replaces the part. Unfortunately, that wasn't an option either. This was never made as a case. This was sold as a computer. So I got to buy a new computer. And I'm a little upset by that, but not that upset, because these things are, oh my God, heavy. And it's also a dual Xeon workstation. So now I have a replacement panel with both my drive bays which means that I don't have to fill that part in to make it look good. I can actually just paint these. But I've also got dual Xeon workstation. So graphics card, there's a SSD. Supposedly it works. I'm hoping. But I have completely no use for this thing at all. It is way more than I will ever need. But I do need a file server, so I think that's going to become a file server. And I like it because it's so over the top for what you actually need that to me it's perfect. It's the perfect mix. So $200 later, I've got a new computer, which I needed, like a hole in the head. But I do have the replacement part. And actually, no, I'm not going to take that part out now. We'll do that later. But that solved the problem. And like I say, that's part of modding. Sometimes you kind of get hosed on stuff and you can't come up with an alternate plan to replace something. And you eat some cost. And I'd like to say that you know, not all of modding's like that, but you have to be willing to go into it knowing that that's an option. More than likely won't happen, but there's always that chance. And you know, maybe that mistake gets you into making a new part that's twice as good as the part you were working on. Maybe you net a new file server out of it. Who knows? You know, the post-mortem of all this is, I think this plastic is different than the plastic that I've used brake fluid on before. I've used it on like a straight ABS panel, and I've used it on whatever the plastics on my motorcycles are. They don't like the brake fluid a whole lot, but they deal with it. The ABS, it didn't seem to bother a whole lot. This, I think, is a little bit of a different formulation of plastic, so it reacted to the brake fluid differently and got weird on me. So probably would have been best, and this is probably the best practice, is to find a piece of it to try in brake fluid before you just dunk the irreplaceable part into the brake fluid. That was probably a mistake on my part. And I have a part. I have a drive bay cover that I easily could have thrown into some brake fluid for a week and say, oh wow, this is not good for it. Let's figure out a different method. But I didn't, because I was in a hurry and I knew that there was an option of getting another one of these somehow, some way. So what I probably would, if I could go back in time and start over fresh, I think I probably still would use brake fluid. It did the job of taking the paint off, but I wouldn't leave it in for as long as I did. I would probably soak in brake fluid for a day or two. It did soften. Even this paint that's not peeled up yet, it's soft enough that it comes right off with a little bit of work. So I think that maybe going forward, my use of brake fluid is soften the paint up for a couple of days, get some of it to where it's kind of bubbling, and then just spend the time and effort to scrape it off with a plastic scraper or something. That probably would have solved my problems and saved me a couple $100. But I didn't do it. So here we are now, broken piece. Probably not fixable. I'm going to leave it sitting outside, or well, out in the shop for a few weeks just to see if this stuff will off-gas anything that's making it soft. See if it solids back up again. And if it does, I'll probably fix it enough to throw it in the new case and replace the one I'm going to steal off of it. But yeah, it's part of one of those things. I mean, the good part of this is all the paint stripped off all my parts now, so I can get ready to get painting. And you'll be able to see the whole process. Basically, you'll see everything about this case that was mostly done because I'm redoing half of it. So you won't be able to see me redo the insides of it, but all the exterior parts will get on camera. But yeah, that's a sucky thing about building these at times. And oh, that's an interesting thing. Huh. There are lights that I'm painting over. Oh well. Life goes on. So yeah, that's where we're at. We've got a trashy, useless piece now that maybe will get better. The metal parts are ready to be sanded up and roughed up and cleaned up a little bit, and then we can paint those. The new part off of the case, we just have to take it off. There's a few things I need to clean up on it as far as getting a sticker off and the labeling. I don't want to leave that on there because it will affect how the paint lays. Well, that brings us to the end of this video. Hopefully you learned something of what you can do and what you probably should not do. It was a bit of a roller coaster, you know. Oh, that's working great. Oh, that's horrible. Oh, you bought a what? And now we're ready for paint. It's weird, but we got there somehow. But yeah, thanks for sticking with it. Learn from my mistakes. Do not repeat them. And until next time, take care of yourselves and get out there and mod something.